Last time you wanted me to show you stuff that I'd made, and so I'm going to do the same thing this time. I apologize if I have shown some of this before. I'm a box maker. This is the stand I frequently make, and they come in all shapes and sizes. To save wood, I usually make them in 2 or sometimes 3 pieces.
Can you go to the overhead on that mic?
And stand. Scoot it down. Okay. Most of the stands I make are a little less substantial, but I still do the same things with them. Chase a thread, sometimes make a little decorative piece that goes through the bottom, and the only reason you do that is because it's there. This is African blackwood. I find it turns pretty well. It tends to be a little flexible when you get it thin enough. Another kind of box I started making every now and again is obviously I'm getting further and further away from what's functional. These are made out of giant palm nuts, and you can see the spindle that goes through to the inside, and they're just they screw in also. And I had this idea of making interactive. See, what's a box, right? If you're never going to use this, you're never going to put anything in it, and so what's its function? Mostly it collects dust, right? So what I figured was I would make something that you could change. You can do anything you want with it. This is another box that I made. I originally patterned it after something called a rondelle, which is a dagger that mounted
over where you're, I'm sorry, where you're, there you go.
Where if you wanted to kill somebody in a suit of armor, there aren't many weak spots, so what they did was they would push things into the eye holes, and they called the weapon a rondelle. And when I made this, I originally put a brass handguard on it, but it turned out that it might be better as a magic wand, and so I took the handguard off. This is made out of Korean boxwood, and this is made out of a gemsbok horn, antelope from South Africa. And it's a box. I mean, it's hollow all the way down to here. And I don't really know why, but I decided I wanted something fancy on the back of it, so I used a little piece of pink ivory to put some parts on the end. And this is kind of interesting because I made this as I went. I said, okay, I'm going to stick something on the end of this. What am I going to stick on there? So I had this little nub, and I turned a piece of blackwood for it. And I looked at it, and I thought, I don't like that. That's just not enough. And so I chased a hole in the end there and turned another little ring of ivory and then screwed it on. And I'm still not sure that's art, but that's the way it is sometimes. This is a skidder. They're originally from Epsilon Eridani, and I have an uncle who went out there and he brought this back to me. It was alive when it got here. And I had it in this cardboard box, and it, overnight it got out, and I didn't know where the heck it had gone. The cat was nervous as heck. I tried to get the cat to sick it, but it wouldn't. Turns out the thing can run on walls and ceilings as well as anything else. And so what I did was I got some styrofoam, and I spread some raspberry jam and peanut butter on it. And the next morning when I got up, this thing's feet were stuck in the styrofoam, and I was able to recapture it, but it only lived for about 6 months. It's made out of African blackwood and African porcupine quills, and it is indeed a box. It's, ooh, well, it unscrews. I'm afraid to hurt something. And this is This is made out of a little socket made out of African blackwood.
You can move back over now, Anthony.
Back where? Here?
Yeah, there you
Okay. The porcupine quill is a very interesting structure. It is feather-light, and it's got an internal set of tubes, essentially, that make it very, very strong. I heated and bent this one. You know, it's made out of keratin, the same thing as your fingernails. And it was just kind of fun. This is another one of the giant tagua nuts, giant palm tree seeds. They come from Palau. I made 3 of these. One of them was a flame-ended scroot, and one of them was a water strider. They're mostly gone now. But it's kind of fun. Just to make sure that you know I don't only make boxes. This is a piece of pine. I actually turned the most of it. I didn't turn any of the inside, but I turned the outside of it. And I just wasn't into it at the time, and so I put it away, and it sat in a plastic bag for about 3 years, and it did stuff. It also split. Maybe that'll stop some of the puffing. Is it still loud enough?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know, you just do what you can. Hanging onto it by one end, it's quite flimsy. It's a very soft wood, and so when I was hollowing it, it wasn't all that easy. It would munch up where the chuck had a hold of it, and you had to take it out and reseat it. Just leather to lace it. I used to make short spaghetti boxes, which are just tall, thin boxes that aren't really big enough to put spaghetti in, but I didn't know what else to call them. When I do the bulk of the hollowing, I almost always work from the inside out. If you take a look at my tool here, let me find one that's more extreme. When you get these tools, there's a round on the front, straight on the sides, and there's a corner right there. And there's going to be another corner on this side. And you don't care too much about this corner on the right because we don't use that side of the scraper very much. But the one on the left, you've got to get rid of. See, I've cut it away here too, but this is a newer tool, or at least hasn't been in my possession long enough. And so this hasn't become as extreme. I didn't do this on purpose so that I'd have a smaller front. It's just over 5 years or 4 years, however long I've had this tool, I keep grinding away on it and it gets smaller. But if you have this left side nice and smooth and round, you can just drag it right out. Something else I discover is if you want to cut fast, you speed up the lathe. You don't move faster. There's almost no profit in the turner moving fast. I told you, I think the last time I was here, when you remount something, you always want to it's flat right now. When it comes time to make cuts on thinner wood, cuts where I'm having trouble with chatter, sometimes merely because it's a finish cut, I might lift the right side, and that makes a nice angle to cut with. You never lift the left, because what will happen is as soon as it touches the wood, it slams on the rest. Your impetus, your energy is all ready to lift it, right? So as soon as it gets done slamming, it goes back up, and then it slams, it goes back up, it slams at 1500 RPM. That's never a good thing. Frequently, I don't know if we're going to do it today or not, frequently I like to undercut this little lip, because see, if you think about it, I have a given thickness here, And I have essentially double that thickness here. And it doesn't hurt to have it there, but I don't see that there's any profit in it. And so frequently, I will undercut that rim. You can use all kinds of different tools to do it. For the most part, it's a hollow form. And so I'm just going to use this little bitty hollow form tool to cut around behind it. One thing you got to be careful about, see, I'm going to cut essentially down to this. See the top of the shoulder there, or the top of the tenon? I'm going to cut real close to that depth on the inside. And if I cut too close to the tenon, it makes it very weak. One of the first boxes I ever made, I cut a little close, screwed together real nice, and I screwed it together again. Oh, let's put it a little harder, and it popped off. So you have to be careful not to get too close. The fact that you've undercut a box, the rim of a box, just surprises most people who pick them up. They always expect to see the inside kind of smooth, and if you've undercut it, it adds immediate fascination. Let's see what we got going here. I didn't bring any calipers. Yeah, we're good. Something about using your fingers for depth. It is a process of education. The education takes two basic forms, or at least it did for me. One of them is to you check with your fingers and you check with calipers, right? That really tells you what's happening. And the other thing is, as your fingers become educated, you frequently put wood on the floor, broken things on the floor. Okay, that's good enough. It doesn't have to be pretty yet. I just have to have the basic idea. I'm just checking for bumps and things. Really don't like what's happened in there. That tool I've got doesn't feel like it's cutting real well. I have on the inside, at this point, it's thicker. It's got a bump. It's thin right behind the little ledge, and then there's down here where I join this other curve. It's nice, but in between there's a bump. We don't like that, so we're gonna use a better sharpened tool. You know, some woods you can shape with sandpaper, but you can't shape hardwoods. Cocobolo is also oily, and so it loads up your sandpaper real fast. And so whatever you're going to do pretty much has to be done with a tool. Sandpaper fixes perhaps little lines, little irregularities, but it won't change shape inside. First time I ever saw somebody sand with wax, I believe it was Ray P. I gotta take that back. It was, I want to say it was Stafford. Some guy in California I saw. And it was just astonishing to me. It was just like, oh, that's so nice. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start with 220. The wax I buy, now this is not, I'm not a shill for woodcraft, but I buy this wax from them. Cost me $10 for this, and look, it says it's got imported carnauba in it. I don't think it does. But it's just they've changed the name on it. It used to be called bowling alley wax. And what's important about it is it's just a fluid. It's just going to act as a fluid for me. Okay? And I've got quite a bit of wax on there. Slow it down. You always sand a little slower. Doesn't matter how much wax you use. It's going to have to get wiped out anyhow. Well, one of the things that's happening here, if you think about it, the wax is now impregnated with the grit that came off of the sandpaper. I read something, I guess it was even last night, they said they use alcohol or something in between, acetone, to wipe out all the, make sure they get all the grit. I'm not that crazy. They were talking about the Beal buffing system and they were being real mean to it. And I didn't do it, but I was real tempted to quote them a line. You see it on television all the time. It's something like Beal all you can Beal. I just thought you should use it whenever you could. That was good. You have to sand every surface. Doesn't take long. And let's see, we just did 400 just for the fun of it. Let's do 6. I rarely sand beyond 6. If I were doing this dry without the wax, I would probably not use 600. What I would do is use 4/0 steel wool. Okay, now you remember I said that you didn't want to wax the joint, or pardon me, you didn't want to sand the joint. Well, I didn't sand it, but what I've done is gotten wax all over it, and that's as bad or worse than sanding it. So I'll probably touch it again, recut it. Now I don't have to take off very much, but I want to make certain that I keep it nice and true. You notice how I get back? Now I don't care if this surface has wax on it. I only care about the tenon. And you don't have to, but I like to put a tiny little chamfer on the front there. Let me measure this, and I'll pass it around. Now, you can't see it maybe, but what I did was just scored a line, and that is approximately the correct diameter. And I made certain it's too small. I leave this wall too thick and the opening's too small. You know, remember the second law, right? You can take it off, but you can't put it back on. As long as my lid's out there, I really don't know how big that is. So. One of the reasons I did it so soon, measured that so soon, This is because, having done so, I can now dispense with the measurement and find out what my potential height is. Gonna need that other part pretty soon here. Okay.
You looking for that?
No.
No?
The one I turned. Now, part of why this tool is so slanted at the front here is this is a straight line. And originally what I did was I made a square end side cutting scraper. And I used it to cut this internal mortise. And so rather than carry two tools, I just put that straight line on this tool. That's part of why it's there. One of the things that little bitty teeny tiny chamfer does for me is it will start fitting before the rest of it does, and that means I'm real close. Because we discussed the second law, right? You take it off, you can't put it back on. Okay. Cat's whiskers are gigantic in comparison to the one, how much over the line is too much. Now there are some things you can do about it, and I'll show you, or at least talk about it. I hope I don't show you, but I'll at least talk about them. Pretty close. We talked about the fifth law, right? Well, I know we didn't today. It's a variety of why I'm concentrating on the front. Fifth law is cutting what don't need cutting will not get cut what needs cutting. And cutting what don't need cutting will not get cut what needs cutting. And so I can monkey around on the inside, you know, because I'm nervous or whatever, all I want, but it won't get this tenon or this mortise cut. And so pick one part of it, get that right, and then you move on to the next, where you don't get confused. You know, most of the wood turning laws apply to life also, right? They're not single function things. Have you ever had somebody be upset because you didn't go to bed when you were supposed to and they yell at you about the way you're eating your ice cream? You'll never get done. That will never work. Okay, so I have a fit. What's happened though is this inner surface here is very slightly slanted that way. And what happens is, see, it goes part way in, and you could probably push it, but it'll likely split too. And so how do I finish that little bit of the curve that's happening on the inside? You need a straight tool to do it. You notice this one has a curve on the front, so it'll never work. But a skew, if you sharpen it, this edge right here is also been honed, so it's a cutting edge. And what I can do is line this up exactly straight Or at least theoretically I can, right? So I can touch it once more. And there's something else I haven't done. Remember the very, very first thing I did? When I started this part, I cleaned this surface. Well, I haven't done that here yet. Typically, what I do is line this same skew up. What I've done is I've moved my head so that I can see the top and the bottom exactly over each other. And by using the gap that appears front or back, I can be fairly confident that I'm cutting this surface flat. Okay. I'm also, remember how I made a little tiny chamfer on the lip of this? Well, I have to do the same thing here. Doesn't take much. Okay. I could pound it home. There's a risk. Rather than take the risk, one more cut. And we discussed that too, haven't we? The disease. One more cut. There we are. Now, I'm going to, since I've obviously succeeded here and I don't need to use those other methods we were talking about, what they are is, the first method is tongue oil. And that's where you can put this thing on and, man, it's so close. I mean, it'll stay, right? But it's pretty easy to take off. Take a little tongue oil and you put it on that tenon, and then you put it in there, and it will stay, and it will stay for a long time. The second alternative, and that would be whether you can just put it in and pull it out without much friction at all, would be a paper towel. And you can go up to 2 thicknesses and be fairly secure. A third thickness, and you will probably knock it off several times as you're turning, and 4 just won't work. And of course it depends on the paper you're using. If you're using a literal paper towel like you buy at the store, your number of thicknesses are smaller. This is that kind of like that toilet paper that doesn't work, that you get in, yeah. And so this is pretty thin. Okay, so let's try to figure out where this belongs here. You don't have to do this. I have a tendency to. That's it? No? There we are. That's it. Okay. Oh my. Remember I said there was a crack? There is. Okay. So we are at risk. I'm going to take some more material off. What it's doing is it's spreading the crack. And that's not good. So I'm going to, at the risk of making it a little more difficult to turn, I'm going to keep the box intact.
Would a little bit of super glue hold that split?
I bet it would. Yeah, I'm not sure it'd be a good thing. Okay, I think it's okay. So, how much room do I have? You can't make the inside bigger than the outside. That's the second law. Got that's how much we've got. With a threaded box, you can take it apart as many times as you want. It's not true of a friction fit. Every time you take it apart and put it together, you're changing it a little. And particularly if you're having to use tongue oil or paper towels, that it degrades the fit quickly when you take it apart. And so with paper towels, you can put it back together. The second application of tongue oil never works as well as the first. And there. So I put this on here, theoretically, it's on there hard enough that I can cut and not knock it off. With a threaded joint, it's almost a foregone conclusion. If you knock a threaded joint off, you got worse problems than your joint. Don't try to take it off all at once. Remember, you're pulling against your joint. Whatever you remember, this is twice turned, right? And so whatever I did originally to turn it the first time, I've committed or at least constrained the shape I can make later. You hear that bouncy? Maybe you can't hear the bouncy. I hear the bouncy. The reason it's bouncing is because one side of it came loose, 3/1000ths of an inch. But what it does is it causes it to wobble, and that's what's making the little bouncy. Okay, so what I did first was I got that out of my way. Right, that big chunk that was on the end. It's no longer in my way, and I'm going to go back to the first most important thing, which is this joint. This joint has to be right. The rest of it, as long as you don't go through to the center, can be art, right? But this is a mechanical function that can't be wrong. You can make this cut any way you want. Look at this, I can scrape it, I don't care. Oh, here's a third tool. Look at this. Remember I got my negative rake scraper here? I have skews that I use as skews, but this ain't it. This ain't one of them. This is the tool I use to do this with. These spheres, I don't know how many of you have made spheres, but getting down to the final exact shape, there's nothing better than a wide, flat, sharp tool to create that curve, to finish it up, to get it just exactly right. And I use these. I don't know of a better way to do it. Okay? Now, I'm just going to guess that I'm not going through, right? And we're going to make some shape here. I'm not cutting fast because I'm letting the lathe do the work. Just how thin is that getting? Well, who knows? You and I will be the first to know. Remember, this is the bottom. And so I have to create something for my box to sit on. I do want to say here that I'm just designing this as we go. I may or may not have ever made one quite like this. Cut across the bottom, you have to have a flat bottom. Okay. That last little cut, what I was doing was raising the handle to bring this most forward point right into where the cut is. That permits me to get the sharpest corner. If you try to cut real deep in there with, see how I'm past the center there? The side of the tool starts impacting and it spreads the function. It spreads how deeply you can cut. But I want it even sharper. Because this is all rounded, I'm going to round this too. Ha, fun. And it's just real interesting. So I can do, you know, as long as I don't go through, I can do essentially anything I want. And I guess it's my box, so I can go through if I want to, but okay, now I have a nice smooth flat surface right here on the outside of this diameter. The inside is as yet probably too proud. But just like a bowl, just like everything, you want your object to sit on this outer rim, and so you have to cut away the center. You can use lots of different tools to do it. Remember we were talking about turning this tool, the scraper, over on its side? Well, here it is. Look at this. Look at the, well, wait a minute. Now look at this. You ready? Okay. I've got it top to bottom slanted, and I'm also turning it on its side. Nice and pretty, I think. There's always room for one more cut. Got a little ragged right here. I don't like it. So we're going to derag it. Okay. And I'm also going to put this little teeny tiny chamfer down here on the bottom, just because I want to. We're going to sand it. Oh, no, we're not. We're not going to sand it yet. I lied. We have some more gouge to put on. So what I'm doing here is cutting this little slant right on the top. Now I'm going to make a complementary one on the bottom. And then can we turn on the lights? I can't see. There, just the last one's what I wanted. There. And so now you've kind of hidden the joint. Okay, now I'm not committed to keeping this surface that I just cut. I just wanted to get some of it out of the way. We're going to real quick sand. 400, there we are. You know, details are like cousins, right? You invite them into your house, you make them, you have to feed them. And so gewgaws, details are the same thing. If you make them, you have to sand them. I never worry about using too much wax. It's just as easy to wipe off a little as a lot. The whole thing cost me $10. It will, they last me 3 or 4 or 5 years. I have no idea. I don't know. I can't say I've never used Johnson's paste wax. I have never purchased it. You can go look at my truck and you'll see. I mean, obviously, it's a good question. This wax is going to stay on my box. Some of it just melted in. It's never coming off. And so the wax I use probably is important, or could be important, but I don't. This was the cheapest stuff. It's what I bought. It's always seemed to work. If some, you know, it's like the natives who don't wear pants, right? It seems kind of natural until somebody comes in wearing pants. Okay. Now, just like I said before about the gewgaws, everything's got gewgaws on it, just so that this looks like somebody was here. Put gewgaws on the bottom, and I have a standard set. 2 small rings and a big ring. I do it after sanding once. I don't know why I do it, but I do. Sometimes I leave it just before the last sand. It is a triangle tool, yeah, point tool. Bill Jones, the guy that introduced it to me.
Did you make it, or?
Yeah. Enco. It's a piece, it's a 6-inch long, 1/4 inch diameter. They call it high-speed steel, and I don't know if it really is. I bet drill rod would work. I'm sorry? Yeah. And in my club, some other people have become interested in the tool, and they're making these jigs so that they can get the faces all the same. Whatever the faces are, they work. Okay? Of course, you have to keep Sorby in business. Okay? Last one, we'll do a 600. Now, the tool I use to cut most of those gewgaws, they are quite sharp. They're very good on hard materials, and so I have not sanded my gewgaws on the insides. But you have to do your final one for two reasons. One, it's all full of wax and grit right now. And so you got to get that out. And the other is the tool is never quite as clean as a real high level, high grit sandpaper. And so I folded it. I can't do it, boss.
There you go.
Oh, okay. See, I'm folding the paper, and I'll use the corner to sand inside. And I have to sand my little side gewgaws here. There we go. Fingernails are good. Okay. And I would still beal buff this later. Now, one of the things that's happened, I made this joint so that it would hold I made the joint strong enough to hold this together while I turned on it, but you don't want that later on. You want it to be fairly solid, but you don't necessarily want it to be hard to get apart. And so I'm going to recut the joint area again, just a little. It's another one of those places where how much is enough? It's a real question. I'm just going to accept whatever shape I've got left here. And so I'm just going to clean this up. I'm not feeling good about that at all. There we go. Sharp tools just make all the difference. Just all the difference. I don't know if that flies in the face of the first law or not. Okay, we'll quit. This has been used, right? I generally don't use it twice. It just doesn't seem to work as well. And so, even though I'm making little bitty pieces of sandpaper, and so I'm not using a lot, it's not useful to try to be frugal. Okay. Somebody told me use sandpaper like someone else is buying it. Okay, last grit. Now normally I might put gouge on the inside of this, but I made a little surprise instead, and so we'll just let that be enough. Now we're just guessing that I actually got it loose enough, right? That the top and bottom are going to come apart, but we're going to pretend. Okay, now I need a waste block. I'm going to use this one. Now you see I didn't put a foot on this, or how do you say that? There's no place for this to register in the jaw. It's just a round circle. There's nothing for it to run up against. And so I think I showed you this last time, but I'll show you again just for the fun of it. Pretty close. It's got to be kind of loose. You don't want to do it at a high speed. See it bounce? Now it doesn't bounce, does it? Oh, a little bit.
Try to push it through.
And I do that with, I mean, my big lathe, the one I used for lots and lots of years, was homemade, right? And nothing was true on it. And so when I put a piece of wood back on the second time, I had to true up everything like that. Okay, so all I'm going to do here, make a little tenon to fit that on. Doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be tight enough to hold it. And I'm actually using a piece that's going to be the bottom of another box, so it's going to have a tenon on it. So I'm not wasting anything. You notice also that the tenon's not very deep, this way, wide. And the reason it's not wide is because if I make a mistake, if I go too far, it's wasted. That's about it, boss. Okay. It'll work. Okay. Now, again, I'm down here to the art. It's real thin this far down. It gets fairly thick here. The inside comes about that far. Now, the closer you get to the center, not only is it further away, but there's more chance of things not acting right. I mean, not catches, but it, I don't know what it is. It'll cause more vibration. Pardon? Yeah, and it'll vibrate more. It has a greater tendency to climb up over the tool. There's a bunch of things that can happen. But the closer you get to the center out here, the more precarious it is. Reduce the speed? Oh, yeah, maybe. We're up to 22. Okay, we're going to do it again. Okay. And finish up the little tip. Okay. That almost looks like a box right there, doesn't it? Okay. Now I'm going to put something on here. And here's the real function of the point tool. It's not to make those little grooves, it's this. It's for making little fine details. There we go. Last grit. Oh, we have to. If you let the sandpaper go dry, all of the worst things that can happen with sandpaper happen. It loads up, it'll actually knock the sand off, the grit loose, it'll burnish the wood, it'll get hot. And so it's, you flood it. Okay. Use my fingernails in here again. I can't leave it well enough alone, I just can't. Okay. Remember I told you I had a surprise. You see the little bump on the top? I was talking about the nib, so I left one on the inside. Just for the fun of it. Little box.